Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Welcome to Courageous Leadership with Virginia Prodan. I am your co-host, Virginia Prodan, an international human rights attorney and speaker and author of my memoir, Saving My Assassin. We are here for a very, very special event. I met my good friend George Rivera a long time ago at a place where leaders of business they meet together and they do amazing things. And one of those leaders is George Rivera. He is the founder of Buy Back Time Formula. I mean, who doesn't need that? Tell me. I want to share with you one thing that I notice on George Rivera. He is saying those things, and I know you can relate and you can learn so much from what he is doing. He's saying the business doesn't steal your life all at once. That's why most founders don't notice it happening. It's one late dinner, one distracted weekend, one more just 5 minutes. And over time, the business gets first access to you, your attention, your energy, your presence. He said, I lived this way for years. And from the outside, it still looks successful, but it's a trap. So, what I am advising you is make a place where you are quiet, take notes, and make sure you listen to George Rivera. George, thank you so very much for coming to our podcast. We are here to learn from you to understand the trap, to learn, and to avoid the trap. But before you do this, you said, I live this way for years. You know, God many times uses our message to create our message. So tell us a little bit how you noticed that there was a trap, that you lived that trap.
Well, thank you, Virginia, for having me. Yeah, it all starts with, with my father. So 2 weeks before my father passed away, he told me, "Don't miss Leo's games. I missed too many of yours," and that hit me hard because I realized that I was on track to become version 2 of him. So I built successful businesses. I've generated over $400 million in sales online, but the business still depended on me more than it should. And what I see now is that a lot of founder dads, they're winning in business, but they're slowly drifting at home. And like you mentioned it in the opener. And so the business gets the best of them and the family gets what's left. So today, I make it my mission. I feel like God has asked me to help founder dads remove themselves as the bottleneck so that they can grow the business without sacrificing what matters most. And so my father's statement is what first opened my eyes to that this is a problem that I need to get fixed.
And when you notice that, yes, the first thing is maybe because he said it clear in words, don't miss Leon's, games. In business, how exactly you apply, from learning that you are in a trap to getting out of that trap.
Yeah. So most founder-led businesses, they don't have a revenue problem, they have a dependency problem. The business still runs through them. Decisions, approvals, problem solving. So even when things are growing, it feels heavier than it should. And that weight doesn't stay at work, it follows you home. And so here's what nobody tells you. The business doesn't take your family from you all at once. And you said it earlier, it happens in small moments, like the dinners where your phone is still on the table, or the games where you show up but you're not really there. The questions that your kids stop asking because they already know the answer. And one day you look up and you realize that your family has learned to live a life without you. And it's not because they wanted to, it's because you trained them to. So the man who doesn't fix this doesn't lose his business, he loses his family, and he never sees it coming. And so my goal, my mission is to wake up the eyes of these men who are successful in their business, but it's costing them a lot at home. And the big lie is, I'll make it up to them later. But you don't know if your kids are gonna like you later on because of these fundamental years that they're going through right now. And so my message is, you can have both. You can have a successful business and still have presence at home. The way it looks right now, the reason it feels like that's not possible is because you've built yourself as the most important person in your business. And you need to get yourself out of that dependency and then get your time back and give that time back to the family through structures and frameworks. So that's what I'm here to share.
So what you are saying is, first notice that you are taking your business back home, that the business makes you ignore your family, that your family notice that. It's painful in the beginning. They will try again and again, and they will be at one place where they will not ask you anymore because they got used with you being there but being far away. How do you advise people to leave the business at the business? Because you can have those information, but you maybe think, but I don't know how to leave my business at my business.
Yeah. No, yeah. So first you have to acknowledge that, and then you have to identify where you are still the bottleneck, and not just in tasks, but in decisions, in approvals, in the fires that only you can put out. Most founders are shocked by how much still routes to them. And then the second thing is, we rebuild how those things get owned so they stop coming back to you. This isn't just delegation, it's redesigning how your business makes decisions without you in the room. Then the third thing is, you start showing up differently at home because the business no longer needs you in everything. And the energy that you used to leave at the office starts coming back home with you. So that's the sequence. It's not complicated. It's just different from what you've been doing.
So it's more of a mental thing, that when you leave the business and you start, the minute that you open the door to your home, you walk into your home totally with your mind, with your soul, with your presence. Is this based on creating a good team at your work, that you can trust them, that even when the phone rings and you don't answer the phone at the table, and when the kids I heard many people saying, when I put my kids to sleep, I can look over my phone and do what I need to do. But is that again based on building a good team that you trust, that they can answer your call?
Yeah, so that is an important component to it, is having a team you can trust. And like I said, the first step you got to do is identify where you're the bottleneck. What are things that you should not be doing, and what are the things you should continue to do? And then you separate those two things. And so with the list of the things you should not be doing, you need to run it through what I call the time liberation trifecta, which there's only 3 things you can do with those tasks that you should not be doing. That's eliminate anything that doesn't move the needle. So there are things we can just get rid of. Number 2 is automate anything that repeats. And with AI, it's easier today than it's ever been. And then number 3, it's delegation, but it's delegation with the outcome shown to them, with the outcome in mind, not delegating just the task. And there's a key difference there. And so once you run the things you shouldn't be doing by the time liberation trifecta, the output should be having people do the important things, having things automated in a way that gets done, and then, of course, eliminating things you shouldn't be doing. And that alone right there, in my case, when I did this for myself, it took off 40 of almost 90 hours a week that I was working. And then, so, okay, I still got 50 hours. That's still a lot of hours. We're getting rid of the 40, but it compressed those 50 hours to around 20 hours, because no longer was I working burned out, stressed out, frustrated, pushing through all the stuff I shouldn't be doing to then go to continue doing the things that I was good at, like strategic relationships, entering new marketplaces, seeing ways to optimize revenue in the business. And so when I'm able to do that with full focus, little stress, it compresses the time that it used to take me to do all that work, and it's more effective. So yeah, all that contributes to getting your time back so that you can focus and create a schedule that works around your life and not your life around the schedule. So, for example, for someone that might be thinking, "Oh, I'll put my kid to sleep and then get back on the phone and do a little bit of work," if you enjoy doing that, I guess I wouldn't argue against it. But if it's done because it feels like there's not enough time in the day, so you have to like squeeze it in at night, if you go through the practice of the time liberation trifecta that I explained, there's a good chance you might not need to devote that evening energy to that. And you can put your child to sleep and nice and peace, and then sort of wind down in a way that you can prepare for a full coming day with energy versus continuing the cycle of going to bed stressed out and then waking up and doing it all over again, if that makes sense.
You mention things that you should not be doing, and it's exactly what somebody put the question. Can you exemplify in general 3 things that a leader of a business, owner of the business, shouldn't be doing, but delegate or give it to others?
Yeah. So 3 things that they shouldn't be doing at a high level, because every business is different. What I like to do is ask the business owner, how much are you worth per hour? And whatever number comes to mind, maybe double it, because I think we kind of shoot too low. In my case, I was anywhere from $1,000 an hour upwards of $10,000 an hour. So when I took my 90 hours worth of work and I analyzed exactly what I did, and there's a process for doing that, but you have all those things and you run it through the filter of your hourly value. And when I did that for myself, I realized that 40 of those hours were $50 an hour or less tasks. Like I could have paid somebody else $2,000, because that's what 40 hours times $50 an hour is $2,000 a week, to completely get that off my plate so that I can focus on what I call my zone of genius. These are those things that bring in revenue for the business, and that reduces stress. That makes me better at the things that I do. And all the other things get handled by people that are better than me at handling it at a reasonable price, assuming that my business is growing and doing revenue, which is exactly the case. And so I was trapped in the business, but when you're so trapped in the business doing every little thing that most founders are doing, it's like the phrase, like the fog of war. You can only like see a little bit in front of you and you can't see too far ahead. And so you're just being reactive and trying to put out every little fire that comes up, versus being the architect of your business and designing it in a way that prioritizes your own personal freedom and getting you out of the every little decision. And so, yeah, it takes recognizing it and wanting to make the change, and then putting in a framework and a structure that you can follow with confidence.
Thank you for saying that, because I believe it's important for people to go from knowledge to application. That's the most important thing. One other thing that you are talking about is the 2 weeks vacation test, because I know many good owners, they have lots of money, but even during vacation, they are with their phone and calling and doing things. Tell us just a little bit about the 2 weeks vacation test.
Yeah, so when I work with clients on our onboarding call, one of the first questions I ask is, when would you like to schedule your 2-week vacation? And they sort of freak out for a moment. 2 weeks? They say, I can't even take an hour off in the afternoon. How am I going to take 2 weeks off? And I love that response, because I'm like, great, that's what we're going to fix if that's your big stressor. And so the goal is 6 to 7 months from the beginning, we're going to schedule 2 weeks off. But we don't just like get going and then cold turkey, we take 2 weeks off. That would be borderline irresponsible. We do what's called an absence rehearsal test. So the goal is, within the first 2 weeks, we identify the low-hanging fruit that we can get off your plate quickly. We get back like 5 to 10 hours of the week right away. And then the goal is to have version 1 of this system running within the first 90 days so that they start experiencing some of that transformation, removing founder dependency. And then between days 90 and then that 6 month vacation, we somewhere in between, we're doing what's called absence rehearsals. So initially the client freaked out about 1 hour in the afternoon. So we're going to take the whole afternoon off. And what's going to happen is we stress test the system that we set up. We're going to see what fell through the cracks. We'll catch 90% of it just with the framework that we put together. But the only real way to see what's left to tighten up is by taking time off. And so it'll also teach the client that your business is not going to fall apart. You can take your afternoon off that you were freaking out about. And so what's the worst that can happen? Maybe accounting didn't get an invoice, so a bill gets paid a day later than intended, or fulfillment didn't get a product notice to ship out. And so there's a slight delay in that. These aren't catastrophic failures. These are problems that if they were, 2-week problems, maybe it's a problem, but, one day is not a big deal. So when you come back, you realize, oh yeah, this didn't go out. Okay, great. We fix it. We make sure that we can leave and that still happens. Now, the next test is let's take just one day off completely in the middle of the week. Let's see. Maybe a new challenge pops up. Maybe it doesn't. But if it does, it's going to be a problem that maybe impacts a slight delay, but it doesn't break the business down. And you're training yourself, the client, they're learning that they can take some time off and the business still operates. And then we do one more absence rehearsal test, which is like a long weekend. We might take a Friday off and a Monday off, so you have 4 straight days off. And then we identify, okay, what broke, what slipped. If nothing slipped, we're ready for our 2-week vacation test. If something slipped, we tweak and make sure we get that fixed. Now we're ready for our 2-week vacation test. We can take it. We don't have to stress out. And it's intended to be so that the founder doesn't have to get on the phone or check anything. The only optional thing to check would be a dashboard that they're going to get every single day. And it's going to have the key 6 to 8 metrics that every business should know on a daily basis. They can look at it in 30 seconds and see, okay, top line's fine, bottom line's fine. There's a bunch of other little numbers that are important to every business. That looks good. I'm going back to vacation and I'm not going to stress out. That's the best way to sort of check in for 1 minute, be affirmed that your business is still okay and it's still growing because you can see the numbers. Now get back to spending time with your family on vacation and you're not stressed out. And you have a number 2 person in your company that everything escalates to and nothing penetrates to the founder unless it's a critical situation. Now, I've been in this in a number of years with this kind of structure, and people always want to know, well, what could penetrate to the founder? Like, give me an example. And I have to make it up because it's never happened before, but I imagine something to do with a banking, we need the signer to sign this, to approve this, or a legal issue or something, but that is extremely rare. So you equip your number 2 person to handle any issue, empower them with decision rights, and enjoy your 2-week vacation.
You explain it so well, but I have to ask you, because I try. I'm a hardworking person, but I have to apply what you are saying, and I do that Saturday after 12 o'clock and all day Sunday. But it's not easy in the beginning. Even if you don't go back to your business, it's the worry, the fact that you got so used to do those things. How do you move people from these worries or even desire to go back to the business to enjoying that? Because it's important and it doesn't come easy or all of a sudden.
Yeah, it is difficult, and that's part of the kind of where the old identity tries to creep in and say, "Hey, we've done it this way for so many years. Let's get back to that." And so sometimes there's issues, and it's probably bigger than the time we have remaining to get into. But I can touch it briefly. Some identity issues, childhood trauma, childhood wounds, varying different levels. But like, for example, in my case, I was always seeking my father's approval. And it took me a long time to get it. And I realized that even after he passed away, I was still tied to my business in a way that my business, every time I put out a fire, I would get this praise and approval. George, you're the man. You're fixing our problems. And it feels good. It's a dopamine hit, but it also keeps you tied to the business like a ball and chain. And at the end of the day and doing some deep reflection, and with some coaches who help in this sort of work, they're telling me, even though your dad's been passed away, you're still seeking his approval. Why is that? Because in business, we have a P&L. We can see if we're doing okay. There's no P&L at home. It's more of an emotional thing. And if you drift far enough away, you even lose the ability to be engaged with those emotions. And home is, well, I was going to say, at work is a place where we can get rewarded quickly, by our actions, and acknowledge that. Home can be a different story. So that's kind of like that identity issue that I think keeps a lot of people tied to work even after we get their time back. It's like this knee-jerk reaction to, well, I need to start another business, or you don't give yourself the permission to really, like, restore that bond with your family. And that's what I believe our legacy should be, is how we lead our family and connect with them.
You are right about this, but even in the family, I believe that you have changed something that will influence a lot of fathers. I have the privilege and the honor to be on your son, 11 years old, a podcast. I have been on many television and radio podcasts. I even interview people. The youngest one that I interviewed was 17 years old, who already had pilot license. And I was impressed by that 17 years old. But here I am being interviewed by your son, 11 years old. You invested in him so much. He was so prepared. He was so involved in the podcast. And I want you to share with other parents how you started and how you motivated your 11 years old son to have a podcast and to be involved with you in this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that. And he loved you as a guest. He told me he was blown away after he got off the interview. So I can't wait to get that out there and for the world to see that as well. But yeah, as far as my son Leo goes, and it's the same boy that my dad said, don't miss Leo's games. I missed too many of yours. And like I mentioned earlier, like, his trajectory was totally heading in a different place. And I made the decision to re-engage my family after getting my business fixed away. And that's the evidence of a present father, is to be able to do things like this. One of my favorite moments, Leo was about 8 years old, and we're looking at this property up in northern Michigan, where I happen to be right now. We have a home up in northern Michigan, but we live in Texas. And the old version of me would have said something like, "Hey, go sit over there. The adults are talking. Here's an iPad and just play, and we'll let you know when the big people are done talking." But I was like, "Nope, this is the new me, son. You're gonna make the offer. You're gonna tell them, we're gonna close in 30 days. Here's the price we're gonna pay. Leave the furniture, leave the dock, because this is gonna be a lake house Airbnb rental. Now go tell the realtor." And he kind of looked at me a little like, "What do you want me? Why do you want me to do this?" And I'm like, "We'll debrief later." And then he goes inside and he tells the realtor, and the realtor is kind of looking at him a little funny, like, "Oh my gosh, this little kid talking closing date and leave the dock." And then he looks at me, doesn't say anything, but with his eyes, he's asking me, "Is that the offer?" And I said, "Yep, the little whippersnapper spoke. That's the offer." And we got the house. And I love thinking about that from a legacy perspective. I can see him with his kids one day saying, "Grandpa used to take me to make offers, so you kids are going to do the same thing." And that's what presence creates. It's not just memories, but it's transfer. And I'm just super excited about that. And that kind of leads into the podcast, because like, we bring him into our activities and really, like, communicate with him what we're doing. And he's always wanted to have a YouTube channel, and but we were just thinking, okay, what's it going to be about? And one day we just turned on, my laptop, his laptop. I said, "Go in that room. I'll be over here. We'll pretend that we're doing a virtual interview." And it was just, I don't know, maybe 6-7 minutes. Then I edited it down until it was like 4 or 5 minutes, and I was like, "This is a nice little tight episode number 1. Let's tell the world you got a podcast." And I released it on my Facebook, and I got tons and tons of comments and engagement. And I had a lot of people saying, "Oh, have him interview me." And so, we went from, one and then a few. And now, like, today he has 3 interviews. And so we're like pushing 80s now in terms of guest number. I release them at this point almost daily. We're at episode 67 released. And of course, any podcast, they're going to have their little queue of future releases. So yeah, we've got about almost 20 to be released. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's opening up doors that never would have opened otherwise. And it's inspired him to teach other kids how to do this. And so he's releasing soon. It's there, but it's leointerviewsacademy.com. And it's teaching kids how to have confidence, how to talk to adults, how to learn skills that will serve them for life. But the vehicle is podcasting. And so he's going to have an 8-week course where he teaches kids on that. And yeah, we're excited to see where that goes.
That is wonderful. Tell us how you apply taking vacation or taking time off when you are with your son. Sometimes when he interview me, you are in Canada or somewhere, so he travels with you and he is homeschooled. Tell us just a little bit how you manage that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, like I said, he's just integrated into our life. And yeah, homeschool is gives you the freedom and flexibility to sort of do school on your own terms. There is a curriculum. It's a Christian-based classical conversations. So there is a structure to it, but it's really cool. It's like if one day we're studying the Washington Monument, we're like, hey, let's go see it. With traditional school, you read it in a book and you never really visit it unless you take time off to do that. And so we like to put an emphasis on bringing the school and education to life, and same on the business end. We do a lot of real estate, and that's how I brought him into the real estate stuff. And then 2 weeks ago, we were in Canada, like you said, and he interviewed you there, and he had a number of other interviews. And but it was a working trip because I was there for thought leadership and just kind of more networking and connections. And he fully participated with me in that event, not just as a plus one or tag along. He was actively participating. He was in breakout groups. And then when the time came for his previously scheduled podcast, he said, excuse me, I have to interview some people because, I got a business. I got things to do. And he steps out and he does his podcast. And you were one of the amazing guests that he had the opportunity to do that with.
Yeah, that is wonderful because education starts at home. You teach your kids respect, values, and I believe when they go to school, if it's homeschooling or private or public school, they learn about math and reading and all the other things. But the basics come from home, and you are building amazing things in him. Do you have anything that you want to share with someone who wants to build a business but is afraid that maybe he or she might walk into the trap that you are talking, or share something with someone who is in the business but does not see yet the trap?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have this saying that, and this could be applied at any point in the business, is you're scaling one of two things. You're either scaling freedom or you're scaling chaos. Even if you're a one-person operation, every entrepreneur's dream and aspiration is to build something. So if your goal is to eventually add on to your one-person operation, treat it as if you already do have people, create documentation and SOPs, and start seeing what it is, the things that you shouldn't be doing, and devote the time, attention, and resources to get that off your plate, because it'll allow you to focus on revenue generating activities, the stuff that you were born to do, not the stuff that somebody else could easily do for you. And I like to paint the picture of what life looks like on the other side of this. Imagine that you're able to leave the office at, say, 3:00 on a Thursday because your son has practice and nobody's texting you to come back to the office, or you're at the Saturday game and your phone stays in your pocket or in the car the whole time. And not because you forced yourself, but because nothing's pulling you in. Or your daughter calls you first when something happens because she knows you're going to answer and you mean it. Or, your wife, your spouse looks at you differently. And it's not because everything's perfect, but because you showed up and you kept showing up. That's what becomes possible when you fix the dependency problem that I was in. I call it the founder prison, because your kids, they're not going to remember how much money you made. Like at my funeral, they're not going to talk about, oh, George had a great P&L in 2026. They're going to remember whether or not you were there. And that's the message that I like to leave for people.
You are so right about this. I ask my kids. I have two girls and one boy, and I ask them individually and one time what was the best memory that they have. And I will give you an example. One, he said, "I will never forget the fact that you took me to concert to see Luciano Pavarotti, and I was the youngest person there. Nobody was younger than me. And that was, the presence, the things that it was absolutely special. And I hope that our audience will take, and your audience will take at heart everything that you shared with us. And most important, please let us know where they can find you and where they can find your son's podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. First, I'll say where they can find me. And if this conversation resonated, especially the feeling of being successful on paper and missing at home, I encourage people to go to buybacktimeformula.com/freedom. I've created a Freedom Founder scorecard. And in about 2 minutes, you'll see exactly where your business is leaking time, profit, and presence, and what to fix first. And also, if you're in the Austin area and this conversation hit close to home, I host a small dinner at my house. It's once or twice a month for founder dads. There's no pitch, no agenda, just men who are sitting around a table. And if you want a seat, reach out directly. And as far as my son, his podcast is at leointerviews.com. And so if you've got an amazing story to share, my son would love to ask you about it. And if you're like, wow, this is awesome, I'd love for my kid to learn some of these things, we have leointerviewsacademy.com, where you can learn exactly how Leo does it from Leo. So those are the ways to get in touch with us.
That is wonderful. George, thank you so very much for coming to our podcast and sharing. And I want to say to everyone, thank you so very much for coming to our podcast, Courageous Leadership with Virginia Prodan, for sending us your question, your concern. Feel free to go to virginiaprodanbooks.com/contact and tell us your question. Tell us how to help you. If you have any question, if you need help, we are here to help you. Our podcast is Wednesday and Saturday at 10 o'clock Central Time, and we enjoy having you and receiving your questions and your comments and your support. Feel free to go there and just listen, share the podcast. And until next time, I hope you go to George Rivera's son's podcast and his website, so you can learn more or even be evaluated. Or if you are a business owner, be a client that can be helped and go from the trap to life in freedom. Until next time, God bless you. Bye-bye.